I've compiled a list to help resolve any type of back pain, and I've been keeping it as a routine for the last since September is December 31st now. So, and not only that, I've the most I've ever deadlifted was 550 period. Uh, I mean 585 off of a bit of a block, but I just hit 550 for 6 the other day. And so nothing but these general workouts, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, probably like 6 rounds of it, have been doing fucking amazing wonders for me. So the first thing that we're going to start off with is our hip mobility exercises, going through the hamstring, the growing, the hip flexor, and all that good stuff. So the following exercises have everything to do with our mobility through our hamstrings and our growing with fat band work. So before we get started, I want to address the size of band that I use. It's a 4-inch width band, 41 inches long. It's a great, super amount of tension that people are definitely afraid of. And I know that a lot of people use light bands or like average bands or mini bands or whatever it is. I don't use them just because they don't do shit for me. I look at it from a perspective of comfort. Like the 4-inch width band fits my leg a lot better and it doesn't cut into me. So I want to use something that just fits right into my hip flexor, right into that hip socket, as for whatever or whatever the fuck you want to call it. But it's something that fits snug, and it's something that I can utilize my levers. So anyone can use this. It's just a matter of getting the right position at the beginning. So all I did here is set my left foot back, and I've anchored myself, and I'm bracing myself against my left leg. My right leg is forward, and I'm going into the hamstring, but it's a matter of how to get in position to go into the hamstring. If you go into any basic yoga class, they're going to teach you how to forward fold. This is all this is. It's coming out of a warrior pose into a forward fold over one leg. So what I did was I opened my hips up to my left when just because I want to be aware of the structure of where my hips are. And then all I did was push my left hip forward, my right hip back, and that squared my hips to the camera. And so now I have as deep into the hamstring as I possibly can. And then as I proceed, all I'm going to do is focus on a forward fold, not trying to touch my toes or anything like that, just allowing the hip to push back and then folding over my leg. Then it's a simple transition to the growing area. All I'm doing is releasing just a second just so I can unsquare my hips. I'm squaring my hips up to the wall to my left, and then I'm going to proceed to go into my growing, shifting the hip to the left, not just folding my upper body. It's not an upper body movement. I'm just sinking my hip into the left and allowing to get into my growing. Eventually you can flex your quad, eventually you can bring your toes up, eventually you can do all these other sorts of things, but just the basic principle of it. No more than 10 or 12. Keep in mind that the stability from the back leg is always relevant. I'm trying to keep it strong, not necessarily bent, but just keeping it aware that I'm supporting myself from the left side. So I have the lever on my leg that I'm actually working on. Those first three exercises shouldn't take that long, no more than 10 reps each. I'm not really worried about that. I'm looking to go through layers. And so once I get done with that, I'm going to go into my next phase of squatting exercises. And as you can see, I'm utilizing something in order to help me anchor myself. So I'll hang on to a bar or something like that in order to make myself more stable, just to focus on isolating the hip. And so I can distract and I can focus on getting some good mobility work out of this position. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to practice. I mean, as Ed Cohen would say, spread your taint. Um, I'm going to, but it's not there that I'm focusing on necessarily. It's the contraction, and in nothing but the hip. It's a hinge from the hip. It's a contraction from the glute, pushing the hips forward, keeping the upper body still. Just as another point, I'm also not only am I hinging my hips backwards, and I'm contracting, and I'm almost trying to squeeze the band in between my hip and my belly. I'm also pushing outward with my feet, so I'm feeling the majority of the pressure on the outer edges of my feet while keeping grounded through my feet. So I'm not, on the inside of my foot is not coming off the ground. I'm still grounded as a whole on the foot, but I'm externally rotating and then putting a lot of pressure on the outside of my feet. Um, the cue can be spread the floor, the cue can be knees out, the cue can be spread your taint, however you want to describe it. But it's just something that to make a point that the knees are going out, not forward. And then I'll make my transition into either uh, stiff legged deadlifts with both feet square or just one leg. And here is a case of single leg stiff legged deadlifts, which I've found to be one of the best freaking hamstring exercises I've ever done. Just because the entire time I'm pulling through my heel, I'll even do these exercises with my toes off the ground, so it's just nothing but pulling from the heel, and there's a massive contraction going on in the hamstrings. I mean, and you'll feel your lower back flare quite a bit because of the amount of tension that you'll find from these bands. But that's also why I use support as well. Q would be pull through the heel, or glute through, and then readjust glute through, not even thinking about keeping the leg straight. I'm just trying to keep it in that bend so I can stay in a contracted position for my hamstring. So we have two tiers of mobility training or mobility exercises from the hips, or the just the hips, from the feet and from the knees. So now I've done all the stuff that I wanted to do in regards to my hamstring growing from my feet. Now I'm going to go into it from my knees. So all I'm going to do is externally rotate the right side, which is where the band is, and I'm going to practice externally rotating, and not just externally rotating at first. I'm going to hold the knee in place outward, and I'm going to take that band and I'm going to push it forward. I'm going to lever my hip forward, so it's going to be a massive glute exercise in itself. Uh, I mean, also warming up the groin tremendously. So it's pushing the knee out, pushing the hip forward. Push the knee out, push the hip forward. Push the knee out, push the hip forward, and it's just nothing but glute contraction. That's all it is. And I'm using my hand as a lever just to make sure that everything is staying in place in correct position. And then just play around after that. None of this is in fine print or anything like that. Just the majority of this stuff is all based on play. And then the last series of our fat band mobility exercises for the hips are for the hip flexor. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around, face the anchor position where the band is at. I'm going to kick the leg that has the band on it into a lunge position, and I'm just going to practice contracting the glute, pushing the pelvis forward, and just a tremendous tension in the hip flexor at this point. But I'm always focusing on contracting and then relaxing, contracting and relaxing, and then I'll go into small oscillated lunges, into a deep lunge, and then we're going to go into that second tier into the knee. So this is all what I would define as not stretching, like, at all. This is an incredible pump I get out of these exercises. So as we go forward, I'm practicing just a small stretch here, just a small twist. I'm actually practicing pushing the left knee outward, which I'll do here in a second. But the twisting of the torso to the right side and then pushing the left knee out to the left side is just I don't even know how to describe the stretch that it feels like. But here we're going into the small oscillated stretches, but it's all through the oblique. What I would almost say is the psoas, because that's where the hip flexor ties into, and then deeper lunges, of course, and then we're gonna get here into the second tier, which is into the knee, on the knee. So here I'll practice some hip rotations, just to the right and to the left, just digging into any place in the hip that I'm missing, and then it'll still keep the same protocol. I'm just gonna flex the glute, push the hip forward. I'll even practice lunging off of a flat foot here, and that's a incredible stretch, or whatever you want to call it, in the hip flexor. And yeah, there's nothing more that uh, I have been able to find, anyway, that has been able to get into where I needed to get into, other than this. It's just something that is part of the system of my list of mobility. It's not the answer, it's just part of the answer. So this is all I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to keep my upper body, like, stationary. If I mean, I still need a lot of practice at it, and then I'll rotate and try to get into the growing and still keep the same concept of pushing out with the hip, and then right there, and then letting it stretch deeper into the hamstring or into the growing, and then continue on that way.